Well, good afternoon. This is the Bob and Bill podcast, but Bob's not here. It's sad. Some of you know that Robert was diagnosed with cancer and is in that process of being evaluated, having a treatment plan. And I want to encourage you to keep praying for Robert and Joyce. You can connect with them on several different ways. Obviously, we have a Pray for Robert Hayes Facebook page, and you can go on Facebook and sign in to be a part of that. That'll help you to stay connected with prayer requests and praises. Robert also has a Caring Bridge page, Robert's Life Song. And just so you know, when you're on Caring Bridge, they will solicit donations, and we want to make sure you understand that those donations do not go to Robert and Joyce. They go to Fund Caring Bridge, which is a great organization. If you would like to give a gift to Robert and Joyce, there's a great way to do that. That is to send a gift to Concerts of Worship and Praise, and that goes directly to them. The address is the Keswick address, 601 Route 530, Whiting, New Jersey, 08759. This is Thanksgiving weekend. It's hard to believe. Kori's with me. Kori serves in guest services. Well, Kori, you have been doing a seminar for our guests during the summer, and Robert and I thought this would be a really cool topic to delve into for our friends that watch our podcast. And so before we do that, tell us a little about you. How did you get to come to America's Keswick to serve on our staff?
Yeah, it's actually a really cool story. So when I was in high school, I came for a winter retreat here with a bunch of youth groups from my community. And I heard the gospel and got saved here in 2012. So really cool. And then in college, I was looking for a summer job and got connected with our summer staff program, which is amazing. And so I got to spend the summer just telling teens about the good news in Jesus Christ. And then I came back the following summer to serve as the coordinator. And then I never left. And here I am.
Well, we're glad to have you as part of the team. One of the neat things about our ministry is that we are multi-generational. You get to spend a lot of time with the younger generation, and I get to spend time with my generation. And one of the things that's been interesting about my generation is for several years at our Young at Heart, which is our seniors event, we try to encourage our seniors to get involved with social media. We talked about the use of a cell phone. And, it was interesting because everybody fussed. Like one of the things that I have learned with my kids and my grandkids, actually my grandkids are better than my kids. They like to communicate by texting. Mm-hmm. And that has been a really neat way for me to keep in touch with my grandkids in Florida, my kids in Minnesota, and it's been really cool. And obviously there were people that said, oh, we're not going to watch online. And that generation has learned very quickly, if you're going to stay connected during this virus pandemic season, you've got to be connected on social media. There's a lot of good things about social media. There's a lot of bad things about social media. And you're talking more towards the kids, but I think it's something that adults need to learn as well. What is social media?
Absolutely. That's a really awesome question. And
it is because you gave it to me.
But yeah, it's hard because when I was working with parents this summer, I really found out that there's a lot of fear when it comes to social media, especially because there's so much information out there. People really felt so overwhelmed that they didn't even know where to start. And I'm sure if we had 100 people in front of us right now, Bill, that we would get 100 different answers as to what social media is. But I actually Googled it. And one of the cool things that came up, which I really liked, is that it's anything, including websites and apps on your phone, that helps facilitate the sharing of ideas and content. And so anything can fall into that definition, which is kind of crazy, right? It's not just Facebook and MySpace nowadays.
Well, that's what's interesting, because I remember when MySpace, I think that was like one of the big ones in the beginning. And then we had Facebook, and then Twitter, there's LinkedIn. Well, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
it's for me, it's hard to keep track of just staying on Facebook and Twitter. So how many people are involved in social media?
Yeah, so I actually did some research, and the most current information I found was from April of 2020, which says about 3.81 billion people around the world have social media and are active on it online. And that's about just about half of the world's population, which is crazy.
It's pretty amazing. I read a statistic probably 2 years ago, and that'd be a good one for you to find out where it is now. But 2 years ago, they were saying that Facebook was the number 2 country in the world. So this is not no small thing. This is really, really a big deal. What are the most popular social media platforms, and why do they call it platform?
That's a good question. So Facebook is the most popular as of right now, and you talked a little bit about the numbers. And when I researched it, it said 2.6 billion people are monthly active users on Facebook. So I would agree that that's a pretty high number. And platform, that just means any sort of application or any tool really that is used to be able to connect people. So, the different platforms are for different types of ways for people to communicate, if that makes sense. So, for example, you mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn is for professional networking. So, being able to put your resume out there, connect with people with your jobs. Whereas YouTube, which is also one of the quickest growing apps out there right now, is more for sharing videos and video content.
What is the fastest growing social media platform?
So right now it's the infamous TikTok, which you guys have probably heard because it's been pretty popular in the past few months with everything with our president and our government talking about it. And so as of right now, there is 800 million active users on TikTok. And for reference, America has about 330 million people.
What is the fastest growing social media platform, and why?
Yeah, so right now that would be TikTok, which you've probably heard if you keep up with the news. And yeah, it's a platform that allows people to make short videos anywhere from a few seconds to a minute long of whatever content they choose.
Okay, so there has been a lot of concern in our government about TikTok and explaining the dangers. I'm sure there are a lot of people my age that don't have a clue what TikTok is. But a lot of our kids and my grandkids have dabbled in this. What are the dangers? Why the big concern?
Yeah, so the biggest concern, especially the one that the media and the government brought up, was that it is a company that was based in China at the time. They did move their United States department over into California, but there was just the normal concerns with domestic and foreign politics that come with that, of course. But as for just social media in general, it compares similarly with other apps that are out there, including Facebook, in the sense that there's so many ideas, and it gives people the ability to share their views and whatever they want. And so because of that, there's good communities, and then there's not so good communities that are promoting things that wouldn't be appropriate for kids that are on there using that app.
So how do I keep up with the latest social apps and the sites that teens are using? This would be like help me understand my grandkids.
Yeah, of course. And when I was doing my seminars, this question was by far the most popular. Is there's so many apps out there, and it's, once you understand and start using one, there seems to be 4 more new ones that pop up. So what I recommended for everyone that asked that question was to start simple and start wherever your teens or your family's at. And so what I would recommend is if you share an account with your kids so that you have that password protected, if there's an app that they would like to download, that gives you enough time to go ahead and research whatever it is that your specific kid or teen is interested in, so that you can make a judgment based off of what you feel is best for your family, if they would like to use that app. And then besides that, if you just want to keep updated, the biggest thing is just to ask. If you guys are watching this now, this is a perfect first step in the right direction, but talk to your grandkids. Be invested in their lives. Be interested in what it is that they're interested in. And it was really cool talking with grandparents, especially during our conference season, saying how, they got to connect and enjoy playing games with their families that were across the country, or even with COVID. They weren't allowed to see their grandkids because of that, because of safety concerns due to the pandemic, but they were still able to grow and build that relationship up.
So, like, I understand, like, my age is that they're more Facebook oriented. So, what are the apps that teenagers are more likely and younger kids are likely to get on? Because for those of us that are on Facebook, we may be clueless about some of those other apps.
Yeah, so like I said, TikTok is probably the biggest one, most popular by far. Another big one is Snapchat. So that's an application where you can send a picture from up to 1 to 10 seconds, and then it disappears onto their phone. And so a lot of people use it to send really silly pictures. There's filters that can make you look like you're an alien or floating around in space, which is really fun to use. And so those are probably two of the biggest.
Why is social media so enticing to the next generation?
Yeah, this is another great question. When I was doing research and preparing for the seminars, one thing I found is that a lot of people were talking about how social media is really changing and impressing on this new generation that's rising up. And one thing I found was that, so when you were a kid, and even when I was younger, if you went to school and someone, said, "Oh, I don't like that shirt," that hurts you a little bit, and you have to sit in that uncomfortableness and wrestle with it. But nowadays you don't. You can just go on YouTube and watch videos for 5 hours, or go on Facebook and see what so-and-so is doing in their lives, and you can kind of tune out. And because of that now, without any boundaries of on-screen or off-screen time, instead of building those coping mechanisms and learning how to process things in a healthy way, they turn to social media as almost in a way how people turn to drugs or alcohol. They can turn to social media. And so that's why it has such an addictive quality that on top of it just being a cool way to connect with friends, it can be dangerous in a sense.
Well, it seems like that. I like what you said about being addiction, because it seems like that is an addiction for all of us. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You go to a restaurant and you sort of watch, and there are families that are sitting there and everybody's on their phone, nobody's communicating. I see a lot of people my own age that are, we can't sit through a conference, we can't sit through a staff meeting, we're glued to our devices. And is there a danger in that?
Yeah, so that was another thing that I kind of found as I was researching, that the effects are still kind of being tested at this point right now, but because of how short everything is becoming, a tweet is only 120 characters, TikTok can only go up to a minute for a video. It's shortening our attention spans and our ability to really be able to comprehend and sit still and focus for long periods of time. And one article I was reading actually brought up with public schools and standardized testing. So normally you would have a big paragraph at some point on the English portion, and you would have an hour and a half to read through it and, write an essay, answer some comprehensive questions. But kids might not be able to do that because they don't have the cognitive ability to sit down and process for that long of a text.
And I think that's filtered through even to the church, because in a lot of churches we've come to the conclusion that people can't focus on more than one or two sentences. So you'll see a very short scripture verse. And so I think that whole concept is being translated into even how we teach, and it's really, really, really sad. What are some of the dangers that parents need to be aware of with their kids, with their grandkids, about social media?
Absolutely. And so I would say the biggest across all platforms is just knowing who your kids are talking to, first of all, and who they're consuming that content from. And so there's so many different communities that are out there, and they're not always promoting the healthiest of ideas out there. And so, for example, on some social medias, there's witches, and people who think they're witches and think that witchcraft is cool, they're promoting that. And if you're not on top of what your kids are viewing, we may be able to sit here and understand what's okay and what's not. However, a 7-year-old or 9-year-old who's on that might think, oh, wait, hey, that's actually a good idea. And so just being aware of what kind of content your kid is consuming, because across all platforms, there's good communities and then bad communities.
But from kids' perspective, they might look at that and say, well, that's an invasion of my privacy.
Yeah, that's true. And especially if you go from having no boundaries to all of a sudden, watching this video, doing research, and setting all types of parameters and boundaries, that might be a very difficult conversation and cause some tension for that. However, I think that it's important in Proverbs, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, in the instruction of the Lord, so when he's older, he won't depart from it. And understanding and communicating to your son or daughter that this is coming out of a place of love, out of protection, and because you want to instill good social media habits in them at this age, so as they get older and as they go into the job force and as they start families, that there's nothing there that could hinder that.
So, it's interesting because my grandkids, I've got some of my grandkids that have access to the phones. Now, they can't get on everything, but they can text, they can do hangouts, they can play games together. And then I've got grandkids who have no access to social media, and they sort of feel left out because I know my grandson in Minnesota, who just turned 16, feels really out of place because he doesn't even own a cell phone. And he had a birthday party recently, and he felt out of place because everybody else was sitting there on their phones, and he was by himself. What are some of the parameters that you suggest to parents? And maybe it's the parents starting to put parameters on themselves. Is there a way to limit usage on the cell phone? I know my grandkids in Florida can only be on the phones certain days of the week for a certain amount of hours because my son in Florida has discovered that it really does impact their behavior if he gives them free rein.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many different tools and password protections that are out there at the resource as a resource for parents, and I would highly recommend looking whether you have Apple or Android or another third party. There's parental controls for each one. I've found that Apple tends to give parents the most power when it comes to that, but absolutely, if you think that 2 hours a day on social media is enough for your kid, there's ways where you can set that up. So over time, if once they hit that 2 hours, all of their social media apps will be blocked, and they'll need a password that you put in their phone so that they can get more time with that. I think that that's a great way to start that. Another thing that I found too was great. It's a technology contract, and so like we talked about, moving from no boundaries or not as many into more can cause some tension. And so to bridge that, having a phone is a responsibility. It's not a right. It's not a privilege. And so as the parents are most likely paying for it, there needs to be guidelines that come with it. So as a parent, if I give my son or daughter the responsibility of this phone, it lays out on this contract my expectations of how they're going to use it, how they're going to navigate it, and if they break those expectations that they clearly know now, these are going to be the consequences for it, which I think is a fabulous tool to help facilitate and start that conversation with your kids. Additionally, I think just password sharing in general is fabulous. Being able to have that open door communication with them and even share the passwords with your account for them. You know, if there's something on your Facebook that you're hiding from your kids or even your spouse, that might be an area where we ourselves need to kind of reflect and think, oh, if I don't want my kid to see that, should I really be putting it out there for everyone else to see? And modeling that good social media behavior for them to show them that it is possible to do it in a healthy way.
I think one of my concerns is that social media has given us the ability to say things that we wouldn't have the courage to say to somebody face to face. There's a lot of ugliness that's been going on, particularly as we've come through the political season. Even with Christians, we become very, very, very judgmental, very nasty on social media. There's name calling, and there are lots of people that have taken fasts from social media just because they couldn't stand all the negativity that has been there. The other thing that I think is interesting is that we don't realize all the ins and outs of social media and the power behind that. For instance, some of you may have experienced, you may be sitting in your living room having a conversation about something that you want to buy. And then all of a sudden, when you go on Facebook, there are ads talking about the thing that you talked about wanting to buy. How does that happen?
That's a good question. When I was doing research, I found about 50-50. There's people that are saying, absolutely, our phones are listening to us, and they're using it for all kinds of things. And then there's the other side saying, there's no way they can scan, however many people's cell phones at one time. So I don't know exactly what they're doing. However, if I picked up my phone and said, hey, Siri, what's the, weather going to be like today? She's going to pop up. And so I think that there is some sort of voice scanning. Like you said, how in depth it goes,
Right.
that I personally don't know. I would need to do a little bit more research on. But no, it's definitely a good point to consider.
Sometimes what happens is we throw we look at all the dangers and all the downsides, and immediately we say, I don't want to be involved in social media. But there are a lot of cool things that social media allows us to do. What are some of those things?
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned with the COVID pandemic, normally we have monthly hymn sings. Every month we pack the gym with 500 or 600 people, pre-COVID of course, and we all get together and we praise the Lord and we sing songs, and it's such a fun event. But with COVID we couldn't do that, and so we ended up going online, and like I said, an event where we would reach a couple hundred, we ended up reaching over 1,000 people through social media, which is, it's crazy to think about. Even 5-10 years ago, that wasn't even a possibility. And now with our ministry specifically, we've been able to start podcasts and minister to different people groups and connect with people all over the country and the world in ways that were never possible before.
Yeah, it's interesting with Robert's journey with the Facebook page. When I checked it before the podcast, and obviously we're pre-recording this, but it was almost up to 1,000 people.
That's crazy.
And to think that in less than a week and a half, 1,000 people have now connected. People all around the world are praying for Robert and Joyce, which is really cool. I mean, one of the things that I do, I try to get on and get off on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, is I post a Bible verse every morning and a quote. And it's amazing to me how many people will write and say, how did you know I needed that verse? Mm-hmm. So, don't totally dismantle your involvement in social media. I think the big takeaway for me is we all, no matter what age, have to be guarded, have to be careful. And I think as Christians, we really need to watch what we say. Because you can't take it back once it's on social media. You can delete it and it goes away, but the pain and the hurt that takes place because of that is really something that's relentless. You talked about a technology contract. Do you have one?
Yep. If you go right on in Google and put technology contract, there's a couple templates up there. Or if you wanted to make one yourself on Google Doc or on a Word document, you could do that too.
So but you already have a sample. Mm-hmm. So why don't you give them your Keswick email address? And if they want a copy, you could send that to them.
Absolutely. So my email address is kwarren, WARREN, @americaskeswick.org. And with that, Bill, we're the body of Christ, and this is an area where I have an ease. I grew up with technology. I understand it quick. I'm involved in a lot of youth groups, and so if there's any other questions that you have, any specific apps or parental controls you might be interested in that you want a professional millennials advice on, you can also email me or give us a call at Guest Services, and they'll transfer you to me, and I'd be more than happy to help you out.
Yeah, I find on LinkedIn and even Twitter, there are so many wonderful resources that are available, particularly for LinkedIn if you're involved in ministry. Great articles, links to organizations that can help your organization. We've just started our presence on LinkedIn because that's just another way to get the story out. So I want to thank Kori for joining us. I hope this has been helpful. Again, you may have questions and concerns, and obviously you can go to Google and find out all kinds of things. You can do Siri. I don't have Siri on my phone because I have an Android. I've got Hey Google. Oh, it's liable to go off now. But again, if you have questions for Kori, give them your email address.
So it's kwarren@americaskeswick.org, and I'll spell that for you, KWARREN.
Well, next week we have a very special podcast. We are going to have our good friend David Harris is going to do special music for us. But I'm really excited because Dr. Roger Wilmore is going to be sharing a special message to our Keswick family. If you've never heard Roger, he's from Alabama. He's got an accent. We can put closed captioning up to help understand him. But we lovingly refer to Roger as our America's Keswick pastor. And so we're going to do a sort of a Zoom message with Roger. It'll be a great encouragement for you. So I want to encourage you to join us next Friday on the Bob and Bill podcast. And then there's a whole list of things that happen throughout the week. Just a reminder that we do worship live every day at 1:30 with Robert and Joyce. That's available on Facebook Live, Boxcast, and YouTube. And then Monday through Friday at 2:30 is a podcast. And then we even have exercise videos now, right?
Yep, spiritual physical fitness for 30 minutes.
With James Serpico. So go to our Keswick YouTube channel, America's Keswick #1, and you can find all the past podcasts, anything that we're doing that's new. We appreciate you joining us. Just a reminder that America's Keswick depends on friends like you to support this ministry with your gifts and with your prayers. You can send a gift to America's Keswick, 601 Route 530, Whiting, New Jersey, 08759. You can call in a gift at 1-800-453-7942. Or you can give a gift right from our website, www.americaskeswick.org. Trust you had a great Thanksgiving. Have a good Thanksgiving weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you next week on the Bob and Bill podcast. God bless.